Did you know that the term millennials in reference to a generation was coined way back in 1991? Hi, I'm Erin McCarthy, editor-in-chief of mentalfloss.com. In their 1991 book, Generations, historians Neil Howe and William Strauss were the first to use the word millennials to refer to this age group. They used the term millennial because the first members of the cohort would graduate high school in the year 2000. And that's just the first of 100 facts about millennials that I'm going to share with you today. First, what even is a millennial? It's hard to say because the definition keeps changing, but the Pew Research Center defines a millennial as someone born between 1981 and 1996. So while the word is sometimes still used as a catch-all term to describe young people, some millennials are actually pushing 40. That means some pretty surprising people are millennials. Who, you ask? Well, Beyonce, Prince William, Dwayne Wade, Aaron Rodgers, and Kim Jong-un, to name a few. Millennials are probably the most studied generation in history. In 2012, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation declared it's likely that no other generation has been analyzed or scrutinized as intensely as millennials, which is good news for us because we've got 96 more facts to go. Millennials are sometimes called echo boomers. They're typically the children of baby boomers, and the period in which millennials were born saw a rise in the number of annual births as boomers had kids of their own. This came on the heels of a dip in birth rate in the preceding years. So millennials are, in effect, an echo of the generation born between the mid-40s and the mid-60s. The label Gen Y is sometimes used too because millennials come after Gen X. Millennials have been accused of killing off a lot of things through their consumption habits. Here's a totally incomplete list of items pulled from various articles. Mayonnaise, shopping malls, paper napkins, the Big Mac, top sheets, fabric softener, bar soap, department stores, diamonds, beer, wine, the Toyota Scion, banks, the Canadian tourism industry, Applebee's, oil, cereal, fashion, loyalty, marriage, and the American dream. So that's a lot of baggage. Was luggage on that list? Millennials aren't big on vacations. One 2016 survey found that nearly half of all millennials were more than happy to be viewed as a work martyr and feel guilty about using time off. A LinkedIn study found that about 16% of millennials won't ask for time off at all. It makes them too nervous. If this old millennial could give some young millennials advice, it would be, take that vacation. Millennials do say they'd like to travel. Surveys have found that most millennials would rather travel than own a home. And you might have guessed what's getting in the way of that travel. Millennials have a lot of financial struggles. They have less wealth than older generations did at the same age. The median net worth of a millennial household in 2016 was just $12,500, while Gen X households had a median net worth of $15,100 during the same age range. In fact, many millennials still rely on mom and dad for financial help. Merrill Lynch and AgeWave conducted a survey in 2019 and found that 7 out of 10 adults ages 18 to 34 still receive some sort of help from their parents, from having their bills paid to living at home for no or low rent. And it's no wonder they're turning to their parents for help. Millennials are in a lot of debt. Between student loans and credit cards, they have an average of almost $28,000 in debt. And 52% report carrying balances on their credit cards. Millennials are looking forward to a debt-free future, though, and they're acting on it. One Bank of America Merrill Lynch report found that 82% of millennials contribute to their employer-sponsored 401k plan, a higher rate than their Gen X or baby boomer counterparts. Another priority? Self-improvement. While many people don't bother with New Year's resolutions, one study found that 94% of millennials make them, and 76% say they keep their resolutions. Every year I resolve that I'm gonna floss more, and then every year I don't floss at all. One resolution they might want to think about? Reading more. As of 2016, the average, that's median, not mean, American millennial only read 5 books a year. In our defense, the general population only reads 4, so we're ahead of the curve, I guess. Millennials are also more likely to visit public libraries than other generations, possibly because they're both budget-conscious and eco-conscious. And ebooks? Millennials prefer print. A survey of college students showed that if the price of a book was exactly the same on digital and paper, 80% would choose paper. Thanks to Vav247 for their comment about millennial reading habits and for being a Harry Potter fan. If you want to be featured in our next episode of the List Show, list your favorite piece of parenting advice from the 1800s in the comments below. So anyway, millennials keep resolutions, they go to libraries. Maybe they don't deserve their bad rap, but they do seem pretty self-centered. Studies show that not only do other generations believe that millennials are more narcissistic, millennials believe that too. They also believe in the value of higher education. About 40% of millennials have a bachelor's degree or higher, compared to about 30% of Gen Xers at the same age. You might be surprised to learn how many millennials are currently serving in the United States Congress. 25 as of March 2020, compared to just 5 in 2017. And perhaps this makes sense. Millennials make up a continually growing share of the electorate. Election turnouts for U.S. millennials almost doubled in 4 years, going from 22% of eligible voters in 2014 to 42% in 2018. The percentage of eligible millennials who voted still lagged behind older generations, though, roughly in line with historical trends for any generation at that age. Millennials are stressed, which is easy to understand after hearing some of these other stats. The American Psychological Association's 2019 Stress in America report found that U.S. millennials rated their stress level a 5.4 on a scale of 1 to 10, compared to 4.2 for boomers and 3 for what they call older adults. This generation has taken over the workforce. As of 2017, the last year this type of data was available, 56 million millennials were working or looking for work. Comparatively, there were 53 million Gen Xers and 41 million baby boomers. And no doubt, many boomers have retired since then. Nearly half of millennials have tried a special diet, such as keto, in the last year. 60% are trying to incorporate more plant-based and unprocessed food into their diets. Despite this fact, they're less healthy than other generations. Blue Cross Blue Shield reports seeing a major jump in the prevalence of conditions like major depression and type 2 diabetes among millennials. The conditions affect 5% and 2.3% of millennials, respectively. We also know that millennials have a lot of anxiety, and so do Gen Zers for that matter. In 2018, a survey conducted on behalf of courts found that employees between 18 and 34 years old experience anxiety and depression at almost double the rate of older workers. The authors of a 2018 policy brief on millennials from the Berkeley Institute for the Future of Young Americans put it like this: as the first generation raised on the internet and social media, as a generation that came of age in the wake of one of the worst recessions in modern history, and as a generation still grappling with increased economic uncertainty and worsening financial prospects, millennials are experiencing anxiety like no other generation. Millennials are also perfectionists. One 2019 study of more than 41,000 American, Canadian, and British college students surveyed between 1989 and 2016 found that rates of perfectionism among young people have increased significantly over the last few decades. Researchers found that recent generations perceive that people are more demanding of them and of others, so they're more demanding on themselves. Okay, on a more uplifting note, at least for us, millennials love the internet. And boy, are we glad you do, or we would have very different jobs. 73% of online millennials say that the internet has been a mostly good thing for society. That's the highest percentage of any age group polled. Millennials spend a lot of time on their smartphones. Okay, duh. But to quantify that a bit, according to Pew, 92% of millennials carry smartphones compared to 85% of Gen Xers. 25% of millennials report looking at their phone more than 100 times a day, according to one international survey of 2,600 people, and 50% spend more than 3 hours a day using their phones. Guilty. But when everything from your work email to apps that keep you updated on kids and pets and people ringing your doorbell can be found on your phone, you can hardly blame us. If you're one of those people who shake your fists at millennials, and we know you're not, steer clear of Washington State. A report based on 2016 U.S. Census data found that the Evergreen State has the highest net influx of millennials of any state, although Texas and Colorado aren't far behind. Seattle alone gained 7,300 millennials in 2016. Another millennial hotspot? China. There are more millennials living in China than there are people in the US, as in the whole US population, all generations. There are 351 million millennials in China, according to the Financial Times, about 25% of the country's population. The millennial population in the US, on the other hand, is about 73 million, about 22% of our total population of roughly 327 million people. Gen Z may have overtaken millennials in total population. Bloomberg predicted that globally, Gen Zers would surpass millennials by the end of 2019, making up about 32% of the world's population as compared to millennials' 31.5%. Did that actually happen? The numbers aren't in yet, but time will soon tell. Okay, let's talk Gen Y at work. Remember, that's another way to refer to millennials, so we can limit ourselves to only using that word a cool 3,000 times in this video. Despite being extremely invested in their jobs, 69% of Gen Y doesn't think physical attendance in the office is necessary on a regular basis. They expect employers to allow flexible work arrangements. What's more, 74% also prefer flexible hours. 9 to 5? No thanks. Millennials like the freedom to work early hours, late hours, or a combination thereof depending on what they're juggling in their personal lives. Collaboration at work is the name of the game for Gen Y, not competition. 88% want teamwork and a collaborative environment at work, And they're not willing to trade happiness for money. According to Inc.com, 64% say they would rather make $40,000 a year at a job they love than $100,000 a year at a job they think is boring. Recognition at work should happen in the moment, 80% of millennials say, not 6 months later in a formal review. They prefer a casual dress code at work. In fact, 1/3 of Gen Y workers would trade a $5,000 raise for a casual dress policy. I, on the other hand, would happily wear the gritty costume to work every day for a $5,000 raise. Except apparently the powers that be have decided that wearing a mascot costume in a professional setting is frowned upon. Whatever. According to a survey by Randstad US, a staffing firm, 38% of millennials said that they've been talked to by management about dressing too casually. And that casual approach can come through even in interviews. 75% of hiring managers believe the #1 mistake millennials make in interviews is dressing too casually. When it comes to social media in the workplace, employers with strict policies against it are going to miss out on millennial employees. 56% say they won't take a job at a company that bans social media. Speaking of, while keeping your work life and your online life totally separate was once the professional expectation, these days, 70% of millennials worldwide say they have friended their managers and/or coworkers on Facebook. Another topic that was once taboo that millennials are bringing to light is their salaries. 63% of millennials have been candid about their paychecks with family members, 48% with friends, and 30% with coworkers. This is a huge jump from boomers. Only 41% have shared that info with family, 21% with friends, and a paltry 8% with coworkers. 76% of millennial workers believe they can help their bosses learn new things, and 65% of them think they should be mentoring older workers in areas like the use of technology. All of these predilections may seem like a lot of hoops to jump through for employers, but it pays off. Millennials tend to stay with employers longer than Gen Xers did at the same age. Gen Xers were a bit more prone to spend less than 1 year at a job and then move on. It behooves companies to keep their millennial employees happy. And all employees, to be honest, because it costs about $24,000 on average to replace each one of them. Okay, enough about work. Let's talk love. Well, love, but maybe not marriage. Because a lot of millennials are delaying marriage until later in life. In 1970, the average groom was 23 and the average bride was 20.8. Today, we're looking at 29.5 and 27.4 respectively. Most millennials aren't rushing into anything. According to a British study, they're in relationships for about 4.9 years before tying the knot. And when they do get married, they're going into it rather cautiously. Divorce lawyers report that prenups are going up across the board. Part of that may be due to the fact that couples are getting married later in life, which means they're coming into the marriage with more of their own assets. Another theory is that the 2008 economic downturn has made millennials more diligent about protecting themselves. Getting to know each other longer, getting married later in life, getting prenups. It all seems to be paying off because the divorce rate among millennials is significantly lower than it is for other generations. The rate has been steadily dropping since 2008, and in 2016, it was down by nearly 20%. Boomers, on the other hand, have unusually high divorce rates, even into their 60s and 70s, which is known as gray divorce. In fact, the divorce rate has tripled for Americans 65 and older from 1990 to 2015. And a whopping 25% of millennials will probably never get married at all, according to a statistical analysis from the Pew Research Center. As you might suspect, all of this also means that millennials are having kids later in life, or not at all. The birth rate in the US has dropped to an all-time low, while at the same time there's actually been an increase in the number of women over the age of 35 having babies. Millennials are the largest share of the home buying market. In 2018, they represented 36% of home buyers. The 5th year in a row they took the top spot. When they do buy, they're not interested in McMansions. The Wall Street Journal reported that large houses built before 2012 are sometimes selling at extremely steep discounts, up to 50%. Even after waiting extra long to purchase, 68% of millennial homebuyers have buyer's remorse due to spending too much on a down payment, underestimating maintenance costs, or settling for a home that wasn't exactly what they wanted. And what do they want? Clean lines and open floor plans, according to a report from the Wall Street Journal. Minimalism is good. Ornate Mediterranean and Tuscan-style decor is bad. One thing they probably won't have in that minimalist home? A landline. According to USA Today, 80% of 25 to 34-year-old people have ditched them in favor of cell phones. 70% of us keep those cell phones on or next to the bed while we're sleeping at night, probably because they double as alarm clocks. Go figure. Millionaire millennials? Most of them seem to think so. In a study conducted by Magnify Money in 2019, 65% of millennials surveyed believe they would be worth 7 figures by the time they're 45. A similar 2018 study by TD Ameritrade showed that more than half of millennials expect to be millionaires within their lifetimes, and 4 in 10 expected it to happen by the time they turn 50. And while that probably represents a fair bit of wishful thinking, it may not be a total pipe dream. 35% of employed millennials also have a side gig or business. Hobbies? We don't know her. Some research suggests that millennials have a hard time developing hobbies that are 100% just for fun. The side hustle economy means that millennials end up monetizing what could have been a hobby, things like photography, writing, and woodworking. But when millennials do find a fulfilling hobby, it's very often one that's completely offline, which is a little contrary to the belief that we spend too much time with phones and screens. A YPulse survey from 2019 found that music is the #1 hobby for millennials, with sports coming in second. While gaming is number 3 and TV or Netflix is number 8, the rest of the top 10 is rounded out by pursuits that aren't necessarily digital: reading, cooking and baking, fitness, art, crafting, and dance. Here's a hobby millennials definitely aren't flocking to: watching baseball. Just 25% of Americans ages 21 to 34 say they're somewhat or very interested in the sport. They are, however, increasingly flocking to soccer, especially young millennials who have helped bring soccer into a virtual tie with basketball as the second most popular sport in the nation amongst 18 to 34-year-olds. American football is still #1, but it's losing ground. When it comes to getting ink, 47% of millennials have at least 1 tattoo, 37% have at least 2, and 15% have 5 or more. And tattoos aren't the only way millennials want to stand out. 60% of millennial parents think it's important to give their child a unique name, maybe because they were one of 4 Jennifers or Joshes in their class when they were kids. When my brother and I were little, he couldn't say Aaron, so he called me Tim. 50% of millennial parents have bought their children gender-neutral toys on purpose, because girls don't need their Legos to be pink to enjoy building awesome things, and anyone can have fun with dolls. 58% of Gen Y parents find the avalanche of parenting information available to them to be totally overwhelming. The internet, as we know, is both a blessing and a curse. All of that information must be helping the confidence of new parents, though, because the Pew Research Center says that 57% of millennial moms feel like they're doing a good job parenting. Millennial dads aren't quite as sure at 43%, but both numbers are higher than the respective percentage of older generation moms and dads who self-identified as good parents. Millennials don't place the same importance on taking kids to church that previous generations have. In a survey of the children of millennials, 18% said they never go to religious services with their families, as opposed to 14% of Gen Xers' kids. Jokes are often made about millennials expecting participation awards, but they're also aware of doling out too much unwarranted praise. 40% of millennials think they praise their children too much, compared to 31% of Gen X parents and 24% of baby boomer parents. Millennials really love Friends. Together, millennials and Gen Z made the sitcom, which ran from 1994 to 2004, into Netflix's top streamed show at one time. With the show currently off the streaming service, though, I guess millennials and Friends are on a break! But while millennials might love Rachel, Monica, Phoebe, Chandler, and Joey, and any omissions to that list are entirely intentional, millennials don't have many real friends of their own. 3 in 10 say they always or often feel lonely, which is the highest of all generations. This makes sense because 22% say they have no friends at all. 27% say they have no close friends, while 30% say they have no best friends. It may just be a natural part of life that a lot of millennials are in right now, because other research has found that 30-somethings always have a hard time making friends. Old friends move away, we get busy with work and family, and it gets harder and harder to connect. This is all very sad. Note to self, don't cancel lunch plans. Ever. Maybe all of this is the reason that millennials are more willing to base friendship on weak ties, which sounds bad, but isn't necessarily. You can argue that weak tie friendships are sort of like friend networking. You use your existing connections to make low-stakes friendships, like friends of friends or the parents you see at drop-off every morning. As millennials get older at work and start to grow into managerial roles, experts say they'll focus more on teamwork and emergent leadership instead of a dictatorial mentality. After the recession in 2008, most millennials realized they needed to diversify their skills in order to be as employable as possible. As a result, a lot of them have a broad base of knowledge but don't super specialize in any one thing. Most millennials don't love driving. 59% say they'd rather be doing something more productive. Less than half think a car is worth it. Not feeling the need to own a set of wheels ties in with the fact that millennials are leasing more. They're less concerned about owning, which is made easier by rideshare services like Uber and Lyft. Speaking of which, 50% of millennials spend money on taxis and Ubers. Only 29% of Gen X and 15% of boomers do the same. Millennials listen to about 75% more music on a daily basis than their baby boomer counterparts. And while millennials are obviously gravitating towards streaming services over physical media, you might be surprised where they're discovering new music. A survey from 2016 conducted by Lizzie Corbell at the Kellogg School of Management found that the two most widely used methods amongst millennials to discover new music were personal recommendations from friends and FM radio. The most common next step for millennials who discover new artists is less surprising: seeking out music videos on sites like YouTube. We're also more loyal to music, helping to keep songs on the charts for longer than the generations before us. For example, in 1980, more than 80 songs made it to the Billboard Top 10, but only around 20 of them stayed there for 10 weeks or more. In 2015, a little over 50 songs made the top 10. About 30 of them were there for 10 weeks or more, and one, Uptown Funk, was there for a whopping 31 weeks. Smoother than a fresh jar of Skippy, indeed. When it comes to other entertainment options, you're not alone in your obsession with unsolved murders, politics, and/or Dax Shepard. 37% of us listen to podcasts at least weekly, with 13% tuning in daily. That's a substantial difference from the 5% of people 35 plus who listen daily. Note to self: produce true crime podcast where Dax Shepard's evil twin tries to kill him and then runs for governor of California. Working title: Death and Daxes. Movies are one of the many, many things millennials have been accused of killing. But Movio says Gen Y accounts for nearly 30% of sales at the box office, and US consumers ages 20 to 35 go to the movies 6.2 times a year. Now, traditional TV viewing, that we might be killing. Among millennials, streaming and watching online video is growing while cable is declining. At this point, 9% more millennials stream video than watch traditional TV, and the gap is deepening all the time. Thanks, Disney Plus. No, really, thanks for Baby Yoda. Are millennials cynical or realists? A majority of them across the world agree with the statement that businesses, quote, have no ambition beyond wanting to make money. 60% of millennials prefer to buy generic brands over name brands at the grocery store because saving a little cash is more important than buying craft brand mac and cheese. Millennials might have more patience for bad service than other generations. 74% have no issues switching to another brand if they have a negative customer service experience, compared to 86% of Gen Xers and 85% of baby boomers who would, quote, switch immediately if customer service is poor. Millennials are also more likely to share positive customer service experiences than negative. And those opinions matter. 97% of millennials read online reviews before using a business, and they overwhelmingly say they trust those reviews. But as trusting as we are of online reviews, we distrust advertising. Only 6% of millennials think online advertising is credible, except for the ads on our YouTube videos, of course, which only push reliable products like Dr. Flimflam's Miracle Cobra Elixir? That's no good. Once we find something we do want to buy, we often get out our phones. Millennials make 36% of our online purchases on a mobile device. And we love a cocktail, a canned cocktail. The Atlantic calls them the perfect drink for a medium fancy generation, which sounds about right to me. Sales of canned cocktails are up more than 40% in the last year alone. And alcoholic seltzers, looking at you, White Claw, have tripled their sales. Those numbers could be trending in the opposite direction in the future, though. 2/3 of millennials say they like to drink less, mostly for physical and mental wellness reasons. That whole thing about millennials preferring experiences to material possessions is absolutely true. 3 out of 4 of us say live experiences, from cause-related marches and rallies to entertainment-based events like festivals and concerts, are a better investment than buying more stuff. If some of these things we talked about today feel familiar to you, but not quite right, you could be a Zennial. That's a portmanteau of Gen X and Millennial, and it's sometimes used to describe the micro-generation born between 1977 and 1985. They say Zennials were already working when the 2008 recession hit, whereas many Millennials were just getting out of college. Zennials had no social media throughout childhood and were probably first exposed to the early days of Facebook and MySpace in college. Zennials probably didn't get cell phones until college either and grew up using payphones and landlines. If you left a moody away message consisting of song lyrics on AIM, you might be a Zennial. Now I'm imagining a millennial Jeff Foxworthy who, you know what? This episode is long enough. Hey everybody, it's Erin coming to you from my apartment. We filmed this video a week and a half ago, and since then, things have changed a lot. Currently, the entire Mental Floss staff is working from home in the hopes that by social distancing and self-isolating, we can help to stop the spread of COVID-19. People who are feeling healthy and totally fine can still transmit the virus to vulnerable groups, and we want to do our part to flatten the curve. That's also the reason the White House's coordinator of the coronavirus task force, Dr. Deborah Birx, said that millennials will be the group to help stop this crisis. All they have to do is stay home. I guess you can consider that not so fun fact our 101st fact about millennials. Our goal is to continue to bring you videos that will hopefully help take your mind off of things. If we can get into the studio while safely social distancing, we'll try to do that. But if not, videos might look a lot like this. Thanks for watching, and I hope that wherever you are, you're safe, you're healthy, and you're hanging in there. We'll see you next time.